Chimi Dorjin Janglaso, the Mogada Julian, the Bardawala, the G, Dorji, the Lama, Jotum Dorji, Jablaso, the Tanazama, Bajawa. Tomong him Jones, I say, Sergin, Josaka, Samiam, Tarzone, by Jo, some Donga, Chichi, and Yaso, Mebo, Gilazo, the Dajina. Tamba Jujan and the Tardo.
So now Rinpoche will be going to talk about Rinpoche's life. Rinpoche warns you that by hearing his life, you may lose your devotion to him. And in that case, you will be in disadvantage, not Rinpoche.
Jigu Sumcha Sobdunga, Jendo, J law. Jenny the law doing Tony the knee. Javandong Mangta and the knee. All Christmas head. Then he did the Ranga Bawa him to do so. Bawa Tamla there. Then he Bawa Jimmy Jinda or 3 pounds Tamla there. 3 pounds Tam there, the thing Amatella. Korapoja get it. Don't talk long, the Tidan Power Menpi. Tell you, Lord Nungatoninga, the W. Dombata, Roching the Rota Lamang Nangore. Then he started to become the Tenita Tandong and Taka, Kodamang Bosham, the Tidani, Tichanga Lamang Mujidi. That didn't like him, she said it. My Laman, though, some look great, and don't you think some woman do time?
Rinpoche was born in 1937. At the age of 7, the Jawa Drigungpa recognized Rinpoche. Rinpoche's father had 2 wives, and of course one of them was Rinpoche's mother. And at the time of Rinpoche's birth, Rinpoche's father was in meditation, in retreat. While in meditation, his father met Rinpoche's mother, and that's how she conceived Rinpoche. Rinpoche's father had a wife, his formal wife, but then later on, Rinpoche's father, he was a great practitioner. So he had relationship with Rinpoche's mother to produce Rinpoche. Maybe he had some idea, some vision or something. He knew Rinpoche's coming. Rinpoche Lamal Hoshin Tung Kyamdom Shurival. At the age of 7, Rinpoche received the refuge vow from Lama Hoshin Rinpoche. It's one of the most important Digunkaji Lamas. Hoshin Rinpoche. Lochen. Changme Lochen. Digung Marvel. No. Changme Lochen Rinpoche. And then during the recognition, around that time, a number of statues were put in front of Rinpoche, and Rinpoche had to recognize his Lama. At that moment, Rinpoche, without any doubt, pointed out to Lord Jigten Sumgon and said, "This is my Lama."
Then Lord Duni, Lord Gogotoni, the Ninga Power at level, the Ninga Power at Lord Gurney, that Lord Kirko Party. Ba cranking at the boy Jack, then won't be the Romana Tang Tenita, the Wang Long Kori Lamajidari, then cranking the Sangaga Kor Talang Kor Tama, the party, Lamana you call Lam. They pay down red. Then Lord Kirguni, the gigin yinda ya gumbana dene tini ngake gitsarde gitsarde tini gumbana dene nisho tapta tani lo jikda seka tamjare tini gumbaga 참나대주 가바테 로스는 참나대주 고갑대 해야지 tini losam은 참나대 tini di 로치는 보지니 아디 주력되라서 받다마 쉬네 tini 참나대 tini 로 니 지마롱 참들더니 갑자기 로치더니 배 똑발하더니 참되지 정말 말했지 tini 로 이점 참나대는 로도 남이 야보데 겁네 류리제 탑마종 배 코토 치모 다다랑 배 해당 치모도 아니
When Rinpoche became 9 years old, Rinpoche's father came out of retreat, and then from that time until Rinpoche became 19, most of the time Rinpoche spent with his father. And Rinpoche's father was a very great practitioner himself, and Rinpoche's father arranged Rinpoche to receive teachings from many great masters, and he himself taught Rinpoche a lot of Vajrayana teachings and taught the channel and winds and so forth. And Rinpoche's father was very strict, and Rinpoche used to get beat by his father sometimes. At the age of 19, Rinpoche's father put Rinpoche in the monastery, and then Rinpoche received the ordination. And after spending around 1.5 years in the monastery, arrangements were made for Rinpoche to go in 3 years retreat. So Rinpoche received teachings and paid instructions on the 5-fold Mahamudra and the 6 yogas of Naropa from Chakmel Lhochen Rinpoche. And Rinpoche started meditating. Lhochen Rinpoche. Oh, this is another Lhochen Rinpoche. There are 2 Lhochen, Chakmel Lhochen and Lhochen. So Mahamudra and 6 yoga teachings were received from Lhochen Rinpoche. Rinpoche spent around 2 years in retreat, and it was in 1958 the Chinese took over Tibet, and Rinpoche couldn't continue. So Rinpoche meditated in still retreat for 2 years, but he couldn't master the 4 ways of turning the mind. Even now he has anger, and Rinpoche used to be a very short-tempered man. In the war, the communists destroyed the monasteries, and Rinpoche's parents had already escaped when Rinpoche came out of retreat. So Rinpoche got caught in the war. So for 2 years, to 1999, Rinpoche had to be in the war. 58 to 59, 2 years.
Dini tukpa jamne dini tukpa mathaga pena ta khala sa jube dini di mang chama ga dini mesi tamje tong tho je ta pe mage mang po ta de de dro ya le pena le dini ngosola ka nge mang po song te tukpa jap tong tho chim po to le te pe ko ni ba chim po re dini tukjo tambelo tukjo tambelo da tamu jani dini ngoson tukpa phamne tani zongyoresi zongwa 가면 저 런고를 대야 되니 런고라 대들이 되니 고 통마송 되니 이거 세 고걸 고다 송이지 뭐좀 미타마송 처럼 된다도 공초로 써봐들 로아메 바디 시부터 갑자기 따베 되니 잠그 돌리니만 배 나는 남도 그 멘다 잡고 산이 마음을 잡아 마음을 멘다 잡혀요래 메다 격키 마종 들이 토소를 몰라 들이 제래 셔 깜짝 들이 지래지 들이 양셔 마종 그런 거를 내는 꼼네 가요 동기면 찜바다 동네 배 찜바 가워지 통영만도 배더니
In those years, Rinpoche had to commit a lot of negative karmas. In the war, he had to depend himself, and he had to fight, and he had to, even go to families and loot for food because everybody was starving. In 1960, the Tibetans lose the war. At that time, Rinpoche were high in the mountains, hiding in the mountains. But because they lose the war, everybody had to surrender. So Rinpoche also had to do that. In Rinpoche's life so far, he passed through few occasions where he would have died. Like in the war, there were bombs, falling down from the planes, and then there were like hundreds of soldiers firing at them. So somehow Rinpoche could sneak out through the bullets and escape. At that time, Rinpoche could have died. It was really possible. So when Rinpoche spent his time in the hills, up in the mountains, for many days, there were no water to drink. So Rinpoche drank his own urine. At that time, the urine really tastes like nectar. There was no choice. Then later Rinpoche was arrested by the Chinese communists. Normally they were all very aggressive and very frightening and ruthless. But because of the kindness of Triple Gem, they were a little kind to Rinpoche. They were not really so ruthless as they were to the others. It was always through the kindness of Tara. In prison, Rinpoche was first put for 12 years. And at that time, there were around 400 great lamas in the prison. And they had no food to eat. Food was really little. So Rinpoche kept on praying to Tara. And Rinpoche got a chance to work in the kitchen area. So Rinpoche had enough to eat. Prison, the worst suffering was of hunger. There were no enough food to eat. Because of that, a lot of prisoners got sick, and Rinpoche also got sick. And with Rinpoche, there were 7 people in the room. At that time, because the suffering of hunger was really intense, and Rinpoche thought it's now time for Rinpoche to die. So the little food Rinpoche got, he didn't eat. He gave it away to the companions, and one of them is still living in Tibet. Rinpoche noticed that when you are really hungry, if you have very little food to eat, it makes you feel more hungry. So if you don't eat at all, it's better. Rinpoche refused to eat. The doctor in the prison and other people came up to him and forced Rinpoche to eat. So they opened Rinpoche's mouth and they poured in milk and these kind of things. Rinpoche's hands were tied, and when these people came and forced Rinpoche to eat, Rinpoche was really mad, and Rinpoche pushed them away. After that, Rinpoche was given food and Rinpoche recovered. And then Rinpoche met Khenpo Rinpoche in the prison. And Khenpo Rinpoche advised Rinpoche all the time not to be angry, and Khenpo Rinpoche explained to Rinpoche how it is Rinpoche's own karma to be in to be going through these trials. So that's how Rinpoche started to contemplate Bodhisattva and so forth in prison.
Jacob Tatini Nepa Jebjar, Kanshar Jeo, the Nepa Jebjar, the Loju to China, the Tango Jacarong or Gortolo, the Jacob of Mimpi Chelo, the Toma, the Loju Chile, Home, Tanka, the Chabda, Loju to the Tamil Cause. Tini Jachatamilo, Sertani, Jacha Chanino, Tini and Gumpa Yanko, Gumpa Tanda, Tanda, Sato Tamte Bebarche. That's a matter on control. The thing come from market and a control. The Chung was there. The get your leg. Cook Gepuche, Cook Gepuche, Conchupunche. Go check you. Go low check the camera there. Then go to go some Lojala level, Jambun Puche Yaya. Anything to the Sejalo, Tata. Gumpa Joyore. Then Lord Dune is the Tata, Lord to carry dog here. Oh, then it is our Katang Tate, Shipcha here. The tragedy here at Joya or Maret.
In prison, there were around 800 prisoners with sickness, patients. So the authorities in the prison wrote a history of Rinpoche, how he betrayed the nation, how Rinpoche tried to fight with the prisoner staff members when he was sick. So it was written on a scroll and it was put in the place where there were all these people. In 1980, Rinpoche was released from prison. So when Rinpoche arrived back to Gar monastery, the monastery was completely ruined. And Abo and Punyima and Tsegyam and Gabe, they were very little monks. And Rinpoche found them living in those ruins. That time, Tsegyam Lama was the discipliner of the monastery. And Abo was, I don't know how to say that. Abo was a kind of, assistant in the ritual, like taking care of the Toma arrangements and so forth. So at one point, because of certain reason, because Tsegyam Lama was the discipliner, he hit Abu in the head, and he was mad and he didn't talk to him for some time. In 1993, Rinpoche came to India, visit His Holiness the Jigung Gyamgon Chedang Rinpoche. And since then, Rinpoche have been traveling outside Tibet. So this is a brief history of Rinpoche's life. From the age of 7 until now Rinpoche is 66. A lot of things happen. To talk everything in detail, it's going to take more than 1 week.
강도냐 때 좀디를 봐 봐라. 지마게 걸로 지마.
Next year.
네. 아때 레 좀디를 상로 땅랬더니 참아 좀디래. 나그 니바 싸리데. 니바 싸와는 마사리. 자컵 가나 지들이 라마마고 첩종이 제자래. 좀 나다 우리 도바 자래. 니바 쳔보도 로주니래. 다 강따져 타마 레그람이래. 이제 대속 참아. 대다다 저로 타마 집진이 로마로 대통 강나니 이나로 코면 자니면 뭐더니 뭐 때문에 도공 고나 말이고 년가나 일 로마로 고점 리드를 살로 줘 말에 근데 로디 상이 봐도 다다리 면덕하니 찍 마셔야 돼. 초동는 농성아 찍 보면 초동는 야 타봐요 말에 디나리 양 타송 찍 마셔야 돼. 탱이래 나는 마셔 썸래 이제 봐 나니 생각 보는 거서 남들가 또 잘디 근데 디 남들은 로점이야 딱 셔니 봐도 탱이제 라서 디가로 셔 맞아 되니 이제 로마 근데 저도 이제 로마 소와 톱이
Whatever sufferings the Rinpoche experience in life, Rinpoche take them as the result of Rinpoche's own karma. And Rinpoche truly believes in that. During the war, did not offend the Chinese. They did not fight. They were just, innocent. But still they were arrested and put in prison. In Rinpoche's case, it really fought with the Chinese and he retaliated. The Chinese had a reason to put him in. So, the other great lamas, they were put in prison. So that's also the result of. So Rinpoche always advised disciples to pray to Tara because Rinpoche has great experience with Tara. Tara has been Rinpoche's companion throughout his life in the prison. For instance, in the prison, nobody was allowed to pray. Usually, the prisoners had to work. And on Sundays, Rinpoche used to, pretend to be sleeping with Rinpoche's head closed with cloth. But in fact, Rinpoche was not sleeping. The whole day, from morning to evening on Sundays, Rinpoche used to recite the Tara mantra in his bed because it was not allowed to say it, openly. That is why Rinpoche could escape death at 4 occasions. First, from those bullets. Secondly, Rinpoche was drawn in a big well, and nobody was there. But somehow Rinpoche could come out. And then third time, Rinpoche was really sick, and even then Rinpoche didn't die. And then fourthly, in Singapore around last year in the beginning, Rinpoche was supposed to fly to Taiwan, and something happened, so Rinpoche couldn't fly in that plane, and that plane crashed. So Rinpoche had everything, like the ticket and everything, just planned to leave for Taiwan on that day, but something happened and Rinpoche had to cancel the trip.
Teni jiba tamba ka nam tha de la senang sang som ka sak nam tha nang ka nam tha sam nam tha to senang sam som ka nam tha uri te ti rang ke yong tin tang ti lama khong ka ko che ka ting ni rang se lo chong sung ta ka ni rang bo to ko ben so thong ba ka la ni kan dre je nang tin u te nga ka cha ka ma chu le ma ri te yin de la rang ke chu de ka ting ta de ti nam pha la se kyo te kyo go je che sin khong ke thuk yu xin ro de ka ri sin na khong ke chung de song do khu nga la mi nga ke man dang nge me ge ba do len te ma to ni khong ke kap je we le yin chu do len te song kho le ma te ke ni nga ke de nga ke chi thu ke kap je ni nu kan de se te nge se shwe yin.
So the great beings have their outer, inner and secret life stories. When Rinpoche was recognized, when Garchen Rinpoche was recognized, Traga Rinpoche was still very small. So Rinpoche has not so much idea about what happened that time. But usually Garchen Rinpoche only talks about his faults. He talks about the bad things he did, and he always says, "I have no knowledge, I have no experience," But Rinpoche seldom talks about his ways of practicing, his great qualities. So therefore, Traga Rinpoche will talk a little bit about how Garchen Rinpoche worked hard in his practice.
Rinpoche kong zong kang nan khor ya la so ran yo la pheu ne tit ka la nge theng tam bo tin ji le ri den ji pe ka la tin ni rang chang nang na khong chama kha che la yo le ke tu kam do ti yo ti de yo pe ka la tin khong de tu ya kha ba su de pe to bo ri de li to bo ri de ma tham thiên yin du tham kan chi nam sin khan ji phu ko yo ma chi nan ji du khong ji ma than cha ma ngoi kho ju ma do ke ja yin xie ya ma do nga pha de zong kang na khep ti nga ma de mo ye ke khep ti da de la ya ma do ye kang ya xie ya ma do tin da bi ne ma mang bo ke ji chi nam sin khan ji phu ko yo ma ri.
So in 1973, Garchen Rinpoche was released to visit his home for a brief time. So that time, Garchen Rinpoche lived in Traga Rinpoche's family. With the Traga Rinpoche's family, Garchen Rinpoche spent a few days. During those days, the power of communism was really strong in Tibet. Nobody was allowed to see Rinpoche. So everyone visited Rinpoche in the middle of the night. And when people saw Rinpoche, they were all crying, talking about their parents being in this prison, some being in that prison, some being killed, some being kidnapped. This was the sin.
ทีนี้แต่ดูมาทำเช่นยี่ห้าชวนมาเตละผ่านยี่ห้านางชายเตละคงเกเซมโซสีที่ป่านี่ก่อกับเตสายเพื่อกับเตนะทีนี้เดี๋ยวงี้ทางนางน้ำแต่ถ้าตีจานามาเตชารารีเตเตชารารีอุตาที่นำไปกุมภาคตาตีเชปากินเดนน่าโยรีเดคิดดูโอ้ตาถึงห้าตาโปเชสกปรกเนี่ยตัวตาหัวตาโปเชรังสกยบตัวงาก็ตากว่ามารีส่งทีนี้ตันดาส่งหุ่นตัวทีนี้ทำนี่คงก็ที่ป่าวาตุสุเตสายไปเลยทิ้งกับเนี่ยละตากว่าสานเฉยขยุรี
A lot of people visited Rinpoche, Garchen Rinpoche, and then Traga Rinpoche's family had kept one of the most precious holy statues of Gar monastery. They had protected it. So that was in Traga Rinpoche's family. At that time, what Traga Rinpoche noticed is that Garchen Rinpoche prostrated to that statue in every break. After meeting those people, if he had a little break, he stood up and did prostrations to the statues. That's how he was practicing.
ที่เด็กคงต้องส่งตัวตีนตราจะเชื่อมวอร์ลที่ตาคงก็ตาหัวตาโปยบตัวช่างส่งตัวดูส่งที่กัดตัวชุดกันได้ยังไงนะสามเทงนางส่งตาตัวชุดกันได้ยังไงกันได้รีจะเธอรวมบ่ฉลังเงี้ยเตะเขียวอยู่เดี๋ยวตางาตาโลสมจะสอบได้นี่โลสมจะสอบได้แต่ตางาโลโทละเล็บเดวริทีนี้โลโทนี่ช่วยสโลละเล็บทุยเตเตใส่โลโทเล็บทุยเตละตาสาวริทีนี้ตาเจียละโรเจรีส่งแต่ละส่งตัว
So Garchen Rinpoche told Traga Rinpoche that you should, take care of this statue. It's very holy, and keep it in the family. And at that time, Traga Rinpoche asked him, "Will there be a time for you to really come back from the prison?" And at that time, Garchen Rinpoche was 37 years old, and Rinpoche said, "This is my 37th year," and it was a crucial point in his life. I don't know why, but Garchen Rinpoche said, "This shows that in few years I will be back."
ทีนี้ถ้ามาเกิดเรื่องอะไรชุดรบทอยานเรื่องต่างๆมั่งเลยเดี๋ยวทอยานเต็มได้ทุกทุกอย่างอยู่นะสามร่างปูก็มั่งแต่ก็เตะทิ้งเขาอยู่เตะทิ้งตัวตาลมบ่เชื่อก็การส่งคนนั้นคงนั้นคงทิ้งต่างเป๊ะการเดินเชื่อมบ่ยังส่งเดินได้ส่งคนเดียวแต่การดีสินะคงก็เลี้ยงเรื่องละยี่สิบปีคงทิ้งต่างกันดีที่ส่งคนเดียวแล้วมาสังบนเทจุดคงทิ้งต่างกันดีที่ส่งเธอส่งคนเดียว
That time when Rinpoche was talking to the people, people were really terribly suffering from the communist power. But to them, Rinpoche said that for Rinpoche, the communist invasion has turned out to be very helpful. Because of them, Rinpoche got a chance to think about the law of karma. And because of them, Rinpoche got a chance to meet great masters. That's how Rinpoche talked to the people.
ตอนทุกเรื่องกับลาทีนี้เรื่องกองทศตาที่คงจะส่งที่นานแต่เป็นที่ยมาดันท่าละโทเป็นท่านยมาก่อนดูกับนัดนี้ก้มเชกมาเบียดตัวนี้ช่วยละเส้นทงนาสานที่น่ะทงนี้กันละที่ช่วยทงประกันละช่วยทงชัดด้วยช่วยทงนี่ช่วยขนาดชอบมองดูด้วยแต่เราก้มจะสู้มันต้องส่งแต่วันนี้มันมายาดาตัวนี้ตัวยาดาคนละทีนี้ตัวอักเชจงเจริญมันงัดตัวอักเชจงนี่ชอบขนาดชอบบ้านดูแต่เราก้มสู้มันแต่ซ้ำทำมาแต่ละก้มสู้มันต้องซ้ำนี่แต่ด้านทำมาแค่จะเด็กแต่วันนี้แต่ยาส่งเจนี่ยินเด็กแต่ยาดาคนตัวอักเชจงเจมันดูคนแต่ด้านอังอาเชลมีเนี่ยซ้ำๆเด็กคงตัวเล่มเจริญชิที่ส่งเลย
So when Rinpoche used to be in the high mountains, hiding from the Chinese, sometimes in the middle of the night, Rinpoche came down to the river to drink water. And then Rinpoche drank a lot of water, and the water overflowed from his mouth, but still he was thirsty. At that moment, Rinpoche got a recognition of karma. Rinpoche said, at that moment, Rinpoche really thought how hungry ghosts are suffering. Even despite of water, he drank fully, and it overflowed from his mouth, but he was still thirsty.
แต่ด้านเล่มเดลยี่ชิ้นเนี่ยทีนี้ตาจงขังนั่นเช่นเดียวลามาสังปวลันเทลามาสังบุญเดนี่ดำงาคือดำงาแต่ทีนี้จงขังนั่นตรงเสียคงแกยังนั่นดำงาจงขังแกจงพาตาเลี้ยกการเรียกยาขับกู้น่ะเดลเล่ชิ้นเดียวคงตาชุดเดียร์นี้สินแต่เราการเจียนหินเวนที่ยามนี้อ่างดูมันเชื่อมบทคงเป๊ะทุกยินเนี่ยยินทุกยินดูโอ้เตสานโชสัมปจิวริยาโนส่งคงตาปัดเตส่งขยุริ
In prison, before going to prison, Rinpoche was so practical in understanding the law of karma and so forth. Then in prison, In the daytime, Rinpoche did everything he was supposed to do, every order received by the authorities in the prison. And the whole night Rinpoche spent in practicing. So Khenpo Rinpoche was really appreciative of Garchen Rinpoche, and Khenpo Rinpoche always said that Garchen Rinpoche is really a bodhisattva.
Ta ti tu la khong ga nyam ni te rang nang de tu yin da ya ye la bya da 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 ya ngo zung ya da da gang ya ma je ji ni tu cha ma yi chi bi da cha ma ge ko ren do wa cha ma ge de mi yin do hon do wa ta ta da be khong ge nyam ni cha chang nang de ro la ya ye ya ke ya da da ya ngui zung ya da da pe le shi ya gang ya se wu ma de ba nyam ni dan da se de ba ta ta zu thu chot de cha ma ge da la ma de do sam sam de cha ma ge yi chi de ram ba thom de zung khang de da da be khong tin bo tu bo yo de ge.
When Rinpoche was in prison, he was really very straightforward and very honest. Gradually, even the Chinese in the prison came to know about that. And by the end of Rinpoche's stay in prison, everybody became very fond of him.
Te ma yek do ya zo te gang an the se ke na ku ke nan du gang an the ni de ha ko ko yu ri zong khang na ni sa wu ke nan du li ka na nang da kha ja na gu ma to gong jo mi na de jing ka a pe te ngal tu da de lam sang phin de ko li san do te ya cho jak zek lo de la de ni ji sa chu drop cho da ro ha nya ne cha lu cho ma ma gel la go jo go to ne de ni chu drop cho pa ka da ni ngo so da tu la sun ni da tu sun dung so ta ha ju se yu ri de ni khong de ni cho na na yo cho le ri cha de ni la chi zan ma chi na tu to yu ko yu ri tu to yo de bi du di zam de sa po ni yo go ho ri de du da ha tam che nhìn được từ không cái trả phá đấy cái đó lão bác sĩ là hai đứa nó tiền trả rồi thì sao này khởi có tiền cái giá trị thì ní chỉ riêng hai tiền số cũng chỉ khởi mà thế cũng nó tham gia thà là tham mà là đã bị số trong chỉ khởi đấy.
In 1981, then the government announced that people can practice Dharma. So they had certain conditions, but it was allowed to practice. So in that year, Garchen Rinpoche, Traga Rinpoche, with another 11 monks went to Zato, is a place somewhere in Tibet, in Kham, and there they did some practice. And Traga Rinpoche noticed that Garchen Rinpoche did not sleep throughout the night. Every day, Garchen Rinpoche was in meditation, the whole day, the whole night, whenever he found a time. And then sometimes he would come out of his room, and then it was cold, so some of the monks are like asleep, you know. So some of their hands were out of the bed, and Rinpoche would slowly put their hand back into the blanket to protect them from the cold. So Rinpoche was very compassionate and took care of the monks like a mother.
Ta dort du na nga ka ta nga song san te te hili ma to ya chen bo he to man do te khong ge thok yu de la garis na khong la jar khong na tin chen na ma sam kin tham che sam ko de yang gu khong la te pa tam che song do ma re khong na jar de le un te la de se ni ge thon phin ne tho go te la de wa re na chi pa rin te phin tho ta gar ta na sa gen to te sam no tong tang te ma to yin je li ma ri.
So Garchen Rinpoche's deeds and Rinpoche's wisdom is beyond Traga Rinpoche's understanding, and he knows very little about Rinpoche. But in brief, Garchen Rinpoche benefits all those who meet him, and especially those who approach him, those who have connection with him. Garchen Rinpoche always care how I can benefit this person right now until enlightenment. That is Rinpoche's concern all the time.
Te ta ta ngang so ko ani ta ha un so ram ka ta ta do na ha ko hon do wa te ngang so la ta che par tin ko chelu che la sang je be da ma che par tin sa kyu tin no pha ma tham che tin pha mi to tin do de ga ri ri sina ho ma tham che ge che te yu la che thum na ho ma tham che kho wa ni that thum na san ti sa ba khon na zong ne te khong re ke ka le ko ba mu tu ne te ma mang bo ke ngo te khong che pu ka ta song tho ba ri sin ne te nga ji te ngang so ka ta un sa ka ha ko hon do ji ne.
Every one of us know that because Garchen Rinpoche is really concerned about the others. He gives the most profound teachings so freely. The teachings that make you enlightened in one lifetime. Garchen Rinpoche gives it like really freely, without any hesitation. So this is something amazing, and Rinpoche is not like careful about the profound teachings. If he thinks it will benefit you, he's ready to give it away, which is not common.
第三条是不就把这我所说的把头可有嘛的，这把么头就搞的是呢，你让说这我所说跟头把的让都一直个什么个呢，甚至说些呢，得把起来没得把有的哇，这空个搞的是光头了光都是呢，外国呢切个老鼠可有的，切个大把老鼠，切的出个送到。切些得把起来没，切出个搞的，为那啥，那什么看到，啊，没得切怕出过去呢，这老鼠靠个得把说，靠经济吃进的嘛，老安拖上呢，可能没个看到这里，这怕出到面呢，靠他切怕拼到，靠得把没说，老嘛没说，这大啥一种三条生不就把它等待了一下。
So Garchen Rinpoche always demonstrates the Bodhisattva activities. Like today Rinpoche said, for the sake of a lot of sentient beings, it is okay to kill that animal for experiment. For instance, in Gar monastery, there was a dog which killed all the sheep. And then Garchen Rinpoche said, catch that dog and kill it. So at that time, the monks asked Rinpoche, what do you mean? How can you kill a dog, an animal, sentient being? And Rinpoche would say, kill the dog for himself, because if he lives, he's going to kill a lot of other animals. And the result of that karma would be terrible. If you kill the dog, a lot of animals will be saved. And also the dog will be saved from creating a lot of negative karma. So that's how Rinpoche's vision was. It's really a true sign of being a bodhisattva who can perform unimaginable activities.
三条生不是今年大这个的，因那大行当，因那平时看那个三八的我弄对，这大体去那方对，然后没得所讲是不切，没个日本抽的，没了如果了大街是个不切，但我神经引大的，送街是你下弄的，你把那里送那体不干了。这大体神经送些，但这样这个过呀过去，这个神经下才慢慢过了，你所叫头这厕所了，你。从体头呢，等到平开在头就三条生不着把人那里从空公把等到多啊，等你让这个啥呢？这神经里靠了的，靠这个啥你让这个白就正往东都会有三块有的吧？这当堂个这家那空个这三条生不着给你个木兰多包些大片，这个等到平头的里公空多啊。
Another sign of Garchen Rinpoche being a great bodhisattva is, for instance, when we talk about the animal for experimenting, we think that this is something cruel deed to experiment on the animal, and other than that, we have no idea. But Garchen Rinpoche looks deeper into that. With his pure vision, he discovers that animal as a bodhisattva, and to us, it's an animal being killed. So that's how Rinpoche looks at everyone, like great beings, and that is a clear sign of being a bodhisattva.
他叫我拍所说的这个大的，等到那些那靠这么样把个这了什么嘛，当然这个那靠神经了，这样搞来个那他东都得挂起来，得挂我的吧。三条三把个一片看那个什么东都的，三条三把另外一个那嘛我都得juntin这个的弄上啊，等到。
The bodhisattvas do everything for others, absolutely, altogether, everything for others. So for them, sometimes some forbidden deeds are allowed to be performed. So if we think about that animal as an animal, individual, then killing that is definitely non-virtuous. It is the act of killing. But from the point of view of bodhicitta, then in a particular case, that can be very meaningful.
等到老妈那把给老妈给工作的弄过，从那个他妈了，他弄点大把。你给听了那屋里听的，空个土丢了三条什么干着的，打我饮品个三把干着的，这打着的，他妈那不丢了，这这他把靠中个样样的混乱的原因。
Garchen Rinpoche's heart is permeated with bodhicitta, and Traga Rinpoche prays that all his disciples, get this bodhicitta in their hearts.
Om Mani Padme Hum Re Om Mani Padme Hum Re Om Mani Padme Hum Re Om
sa